Welcome to the Science and Spirituality podcast. Kevin here with my amazing brother, Chris, as usual. And before we get into this episode on the law of vibration, a quick invitation for you. So, we have now created a science and spirituality community, a space where you can join to meet others who are like minded like you from all around the world. We have listeners from 113 countries on the podcast now, and it's free. You can sign up for free. It will be in, we use a software called Kajabi, and they actually have an app that you can download. It's called Kajabi Communities. And once you sign up for the Science and Spirituality community, then you can actually access our community through the Kajabi app or online. I believe they have a way you can log in through a web app. But it's a space for you to connect with others, to ask questions, to chat with others, to share your ideas. And we'll be there as well and answering questions or sharing ideas. And we'd love to hear from you as well of like what podcast episodes you'd love to hear from or feedback. And so again, this community is free. You can click the link in the description of this episode to sign up. And we will also have a option if you would like to go deeper with us in community, then there will be a paid option. So we're now transitioning our subscriber program to this Kajabi platform. So you will still have access to now all of the episodes we have on our subscriber program. There's currently 26 new episodes or additional episodes beyond the current, free podcast episodes you find here on whether Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to our podcasts. But there will be additional deeper dive podcasts that you get access to for just $9 a month. And we will also have opportunity to have conversation where we're going to go live in the community, in that paid community where we'll have like an hour chat once a month. You can ask us questions, actually like converse with us. And also, what was the other thing, Chris? The podcast recording?
Yeah, so there's actually a cool idea that we were talking about just a little while ago about when we start recording our podcast episodes, we're actually going to do them live in the paid community space, and we're going to start the recording like right when me and Kevin get on Zoom, so you can kind of get a, I guess, behind the scenes look into how we start talking about what we're going to talk about on the podcast before we get on. And so you won't be able to interact with us in that space yet, but it'll be a cool, just kind of behind the scenes, like, all right, like how do these guys think of topics? Like, how do they get ready for the podcast? Like, just seeing us like talk as brothers and stuff. I think it'll be a really good like behind the scenes and getting under the hood of like the podcast, and just
Yeah.
another, way that you guys can connect to us more. And we've been thinking about this community thing and trying to find a good way to do it for a really long time, because we know that we have a lot of like people who listen every, week in and week out, and people that have reached out to us on Instagram and stuff and want to connect with us. And we were just struggling to find a way to best do that. And then, we signed up for Kajabi at the beginning of this year, and they have all these awesome resources. And like Kevin was talking about, the communities app is so cool because like if we go live or if we start like answering questions, like you'll actually get ping notifications, like a text message or like Instagram notifications, like, hey, Chris and Kevin are going live, or Chris and Kevin answered your question, or like someone posted in here. And it's like just a really cool way for us to interact with you more. And that's why we're really excited about it.
Definitely. Yeah. And so again, there's two levels to this. One community is free, where again, you can chat with others, you can post questions, you can connect. It's a little less in depth than again the paid community. So, but it's just $9 a month if you'd love to become a subscriber. We're still calling it, of the Science and Spirituality podcast. And that'll get you access to right now 26 new extra episodes. And also we're going to add more as we go along.
Yeah.
And then also the opportunity to have like a Q&A call or a connection call. Like we're thinking about once a month, as well as the opportunity to watch us actually record an episode live. Like whenever we record episodes, we'll make sure we go live in the paid community. So you can get it behind the scenes, but then like Chris said, but then also you can actually listen to the episode we're recording live, quite literally, like we just said. And that's really actually you'll be the first listener of any of the podcasts we record, because we actually will probably post those recordings like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So you'll actually get insider access for when we record new episodes. So you'll be the first to listen. So anyway, if you'd like to be a part of any of those communities, whether it's the free community or the paid community, $9 a month, then again, you can click the link in the description of this episode and sign up. With that said, let's go forward now with this episode on the law of vibration and how to access this law of vibration to use it to change your life. And this is quite a very simple topic in some ways, but in some other ways, it's deep. It covers everything of life itself. And so we're going to talk about that today and what it means, like what is the law of vibration, again, how to use it.
Yeah, I think this law is really interesting because people who have come into the spiritual community, I feel like have I feel like the law that introduces people the most to it is the law of attraction.
Yes.
And so everyone's familiar with the law of attraction, right? Like, but most people aren't familiar with the law of vibration, which is actually the underlying law of the law of attraction. It's actually the one that's like foundation to the law of attraction because it's like your vibration, everything vibrates, like everything is energy. And when you're giving that out into the universe, into space, like that's what you end up attracting. So it's like the law that underlies the law of attraction. But not many
Exactly.
people have heard about it. So that's what we want to get into and like
Right.
really kind of break that down.
100%. Yeah. And I'm glad you actually brought that up, Chris, because I didn't even put that in our notes for what we're going to talk about, but you're spot on. Like the law of attraction, how most people know of it, it's a secondary law. Or like you said, the law of vibration underlies the law of attraction. So the primary law is the law of vibration. So let's just define it first. What is the law of vibration? Law of vibration basically dictates that, like Chris said, everything vibrates. Everything is energy. So you could see this from both a spiritual as well as a scientific aspect or a viewpoint or perception. The scientific approach, more practical, if you go down to the deepest depths of the particles of matter that make up our reality, it's, I mean, at the very, very deepest level, actually, let's break it down first. Most people know it's atoms, right? It's like atoms that are making up different molecules that make up different compounds that make up different pieces of matter we may call our body, our desk, our computer, our phone, even the air we breathe. It's all particles of or parts of atoms that come together to make up these more denser or more realistic things that we can actually perceive and experience. But so even those things, atoms, if you break them down even further, because I mean, think about the periodic table of elements. All of those are individual atoms, but each atom is then made up of particles that we call protons, neutrons, and electrons.
Electrons, yeah.
I think there's one other. I think it's like not neutrons, positrons. I don't know. There's something else. I don't know exactly, but that we don't need the
Yeah.
all every single one. This is not a this is not a college class. We
Not a
need
physics class.
everything exactly. But so again, just the basics that we have those particles of matter. Then over the last several decades, we've our science, our technology has evolved to where we can actually dive deeper and realize and see that those atomic particles are now actually made up of subatomic particles called quarks, and they have different spins to them. There's actually a couple other names as well, but one of the most common ones known are quarks. And those quarks then, because quarks make up the protons, neutrons, electrons, all that, those are even smaller, broken down to the deepest thing we've found so far in our science. They're literally called dancing filaments of light. You can look this up. It's called string theory. And that our most powerful microscopes have like dove deep into the depths of an atom and found that what's at the core is literally just what looks like these strings of light. And all they're doing, they're just dancing.
Just vibing.
They're vibing. They're just vibrating. And so at the deepest level of what we call life itself, or what we call the universe, what makes up matter, are literally just different rates of vibration of these strings. You can even imagine it's like an instrument, like say like a string instrument, like a violin or a guitar. Like they're literally these strings that vibrate, and then depending on the rate of vibration, it makes up different subatomic particles, and then different like the atomic particles, and those different atomic particles then make up different atoms, and so on and so forth, into our more denser, more real thing that we can perceive as a human. So, but literally at the core of it, it's just different vibration. It's all vibrating just different rates. And so if we vibrate different things at different rates, we get different expressions of reality. Super basic, but see how kind of in depth that is, quite literally.
Yeah.
And why we want to, at least for me, why I break this down so particularly, and then we'll get into the spirituality of this, is that when we realize that everything is vibration, then we then have to ask ourselves the question, okay, if I want a different experience in life, I want to change my life, then all I need to do is vibe differently. I need to vibrate differently. We'll get more into how to do that, but it really comes down to our energy or our vibration or we may call it in our human experience a feeling or a thought, different ways of thinking and feeling that can change our life.
Yeah, and I think one thing to the entire time that you're explaining that, the one thing that I was thinking about, how to relate it to me and you and the people who are listening is that we have the unique ability as human beings to change our vibrational state, and
Yes,
that's something that not everything on this planet can say that they can do. It's like we're in this unique position where once we understand this, that it's like how we're vibrating, how we're feeling, like what we're thinking and feeling creates this like electromagnetic field around ourselves. And that contributes to like what we attract and what we see and how we perceive the world around us. And we have the unique ability to affect that, to change that. And so understanding that you can change your vibration is very key to kind of digesting before we move on in this episode, that you have this ability to change.
exactly. That's what it comes down to, is that we can change our vibration. So again, like we said, we'll cover more of how, but I want to touch on the spiritual side of this now.
Mm.
So got the science and especially more physical matter, but we've been using a word actually that starts to bring us into the spiritual side of this conversation of the law of vibration, and that is energy. Energy just is. And in coming back to a little bit of physics, I think was it Newton, his laws of the universe that, or laws of shit. I need to go
That
back to
energy can't be
college.
created or destroyed.
Exactly. Yeah. But
I
what
don't
are
know if it
those?
was Newton, but it was
Someone,
one famous guy, like
right.
Newton or like Einstein or like one of those guys.
I'm gonna
You
look
wanna
it
look
up
it
really
up?
quick.
Yeah.
Energy cannot be created. But that's where I'm going with this, that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's actually called the law of conservation of energy. There we go. Um, Now, who the heck had done that, had said that? We'll find it out. But energy, though, energy, it's something that can be measured now more and more with our scientific instruments. But I really believe it has a spiritual source or component. I mean, everything does. Everything comes from source, from spirit, from God, from the infinite. But our energy and vibration, the only way that we can actually control our vibration and shift and change it is that we've been given the opportunity by life itself, by spirit, to be able to be in this human incarnation, in this experience, to then direct and control our thoughts and our emotions over time, and of course our actions. And that is coming from the vibration that we have chosen, or uh, we've patterned into our being. But most of us, we are raised that we don't have tons of power, that we just take life as it is, and whatever circumstances we're dealt, then you got to deal with it, and that just is what it is. But it's not the truth. I believe we're here so that we can shift and change our vibration, and that's the God-given right that we all have, is to
Mhm.
choose what thoughts we think, to shift our energy that we may call our feeling. But like Chris said, it moves into our energetic field we can call our personal electromagnetic field, also called the torus field, and that then changes our reality outside of us. But it
Yeah.
starts from within, and it starts from this spiritual component that we have the ability to do so.
And I think you mentioned something really important before. I forgot the exact words that you said, but it's like you can have this vibrational feeling that you're emitting and not even realize that you're consciously doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it really is like a thing that you shift over time, because based on like the way that you think and the way that you feel over time, it creates this vibrational field around you. And so it's not just about waking up one day and being like, okay, I'm going to totally think different all of a sudden. It's like sometimes it takes time, because these types of like emotions and energy are so ingrained in us from like how we've been behaving over the last few weeks, few months, or few years, that it could take some time to actually change. But you do
Exactly.
have the ability to change. You're at the focal point of that. And maybe for some people too that are feeling a little skeptical about this, especially like with starting in, let's say, certain circumstances or situations, it's like you can kind of do a thought experiment about this and say, okay, like if I don't have any ability to change like how I'm feeling, or any ability to influence like where I end up in life, everyone who starts in a particular place with particular situations should end up in the exact same place as the next person who has those same exact situations and circumstances. But you look throughout history and throughout just studying any type of humans over a long period of time, you can see that there's people who start in circumstances and in the same circumstances and end up in completely different places. And so when you start to realize that, you can start to think, all right, like what is what are these individuals doing? And again, like when you study people who are super successful, like you can start to see patterns. And I think that's where the whole personal development industry kind of fleshed out of, is like people studying these people who've done these incredible things and starting to notice and piece together that they were all doing something in a similar fashion. And a lot of it came down to their mindset, how they were thinking, how they made themselves feel emotionally, and how they carried their energy. And that over time, it changes how you interact with the world, and it changes the opportunities that you get and the opportunities that you allow yourself to see.
Facts, big facts. That's really good. That was really well explained. Because you're touching a point that I think is it's a big idea for most of us, including myself. Honestly, when I first heard of it, and even to this day, it's like, all right, like literally in this conversation, it's like helping me expand my mind and perception on this. That, like you said, it doesn't matter actually the circumstance, but it matters the energy that you're emitting over time. That's a choice, and then that changes the circumstances that you have over time, like later on in life. It's not what you're dealt with in life that keeps you in a certain situation. Like you can change that, and it depends on your perception, really. It's like if I'm limited and like, oh, I can't, then you most certainly won't, because that thought moves into a feeling, that feeling then is emitted through your own energy, and then you probably wouldn't do something that you would have done if you were feeling more confident that you could change your
Mhm.
situation. And so it's super basic in that way, but it really does fall on the foundation of the law of vibration, because the vibration that you're then emitting is not only what you're influencing the energy around you to become, but it's also, like you said, Chris, attracting to you different things that can help you in changing the situation that you've been dealt with in life.
Yeah. And this also isn't to say like there's certain situations and circumstances that like they're not fair. Like I
Oh,
want to
thousand
point
percent.
that out there as well, that it's like yes, like there's certain people that are starting with different, that are dealt different hands in life, and they might have to work harder, or like
Right.
work with this law, and kind of like have that focal point more on themselves to change and stuff. But it's like what we're trying to say is that it's possible, and the more you study humans over time, the more you realize that it really isn't the situation that you're dealt with that determines your ultimate endpoint.
Exactly.
That's like, I think that's like the general point that we're trying to bring up.
Yeah.
Not saying that everything is equal all the time because of this. It's like, no, it's not. Of course not. But it's like there is like this idea of this like personal focal point. It's like putting the responsibility, or at least like noticing that you have some responsibility within how you can force yourself to think and feel no matter what situation you're in.
Exactly.
And that's empowering. Like that's what I also want to point out to. That's very empowering, because if you feel like you don't have any ability to change the situation, or change the way that you're looking at the situation, you become helpless. You're like, I can't do anything about it. But like learning that you have this ability to change the way you think and feel, and that over time changes the energy that you emit out into the world, and that changes the way you see the world and perhaps the opportunities. That's what we're trying to get at.
A
That's
thousand
super
percent.
powerful.
I want to give the example, the most profound example I ever heard of with this kind of idea, that you're right. Like there are certain circumstances that people are dealt with in life that are not fair and way more difficult than others. So to honor that makes me think of, why am I forgetting his name? The one who got put into the Nazi concentration camps.
Viktor
Remember his?
Frankl.
Yes, Viktor Frankl. So he was, I believe, he was a psychologist, and his whole family was taken from him. He was put into concentration camps, and I mean, clearly had very, very difficult circumstance. And yet, after all his family was taken from him, he was everything, all of his work was taken from him. Like actually, at one point, he was writing his manuscript because he wanted to get out still his work in the world and like do something for good, even though he was confined. He was literally writing his manuscript on like I think it was toilet paper, and was like hiding it in his like very, very thin 1-inch mattress. They finally found it. They took it from him, burned it, literally burned it in front of him, stripped him naked, and then he had one last thing that they didn't even realize he had still. That was a thin gold wedding band. And once they were demanding that from him. As he was taking it off, he touched this place inside of him, which is what we're talking about. That you're not limited by circumstance, but not to say that that circumstance doesn't absolutely suck, and you wouldn't prefer it, but Dr. Viktor Frankl, because he'd survived the Nazi
Mhm.
concentration camps and everything, but he wrote about this, that that moment when he was taking off that gold wedding band, he touched a place inside of himself that where he said is like, they can take everything from me, but they cannot make me hate them. That's a choice I have.
Mhm.
And he would later teach this. He called it logotherapy, that there is a point of power within each and every one of us that we get to respond to a situation how we want to, despite what's actually happening within our own life. And
Yeah.
so that to me is like one of the most powerful examples of that, because yes, no one would choose that. And God forbid that ever happens to any one of us in any degree, any similarity, but that there's still that point of power with it. And that
Yeah.
that is empowering, like you said, Chris. And I can almost guarantee you that his vibration was different. At the very least, like even if he had not made it out of that circumstance, like he probably would have lived a very different experience within that than
Yeah.
he would have if he was just a victim.
Yeah. I think as I read his book recently, I think it was like I read it 2 years ago, and that moment that you were talking about, I think what the way he described it was like the last like the personal freedom, like the last
Last
like
authentic freedom.
yeah, like authentic freedom, where it's like no matter what is happening around you, like you have the ability to respond to it, and no
Yes.
one can take that away from you, no matter what situation you're in. And I was thinking about like Nelson Mandela is another interesting story about that too, because I don't know the super specifics, but I know that you can read up on him too and how he survived being thrown in jail for like 20 or 30 years over something he didn't do, and then he ended up coming out and becoming president of the country. And like his whole mindset about being in jail was kind of similar to that, where he's like, this is my situation, and like it's my reality, it's happening, but like I get to choose how I'm going to respond to this, and that is my choice. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very, very powerful. Like I was almost kind of getting goosebumps when you were talking about his story and that last vestige of personal freedom, like that ability to respond. It's so powerful.
Right. You, if you don't mind, I would actually like to share a bit more of that story with Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know it because our mentor, Mary Morrissey, has shared this story. She has actually had conversations with him. I think when he was alive. I don't think he's alive anymore, but she got the opportunity to talk with him and ask the question, like, how did you do it? How did you go through, I think it was 27 years of prison, and then actually get out and then become the president of the country that has sentenced you to prison? And he said that it was the first few years were not good. Like he had the dream of ending apartheid in his country and to be free and to do that work, but he didn't believe it at first when he was first put into prison. He's like, how the heck is that going to happen while I'm in here? But the
Mm-hmm.
first thing, so this is what Nelson Mandela told Mary, and then Mary tells the story that when she asked that question, he said that he had at first caught a thought, a belief that, okay, well, what if this circumstance that I'm in is actually the process of change that brings my dream to reality? What if? And he said that when he first thought that thought, it was like a drop of water on a parched field of land. It was like just so rich and so helpful. And at the very least, he said it just made me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, so then it was like, oh, wait, if this is making me feel better, why not continue that kind of thinking, to just nurture that kind of thinking to see what happens? And so over time, that's what started to make change in literally his vibration, right? Like law of vibration, thinking differently. And so just a possibility is like, what if this could actually be the way in which this actually comes about? And he said it was not easy. The term he used that he told Mary was that he started climbing the slope of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes right in alignment with the law of vibration, is that you're staying more in tune with the reality that you want to create. And that at the very least, the beginning changes your vibration, your feeling. Like he said, he felt better by thinking that thought. And then some ideas started to come to him. It's like, what if I just write letters? This is actually like, that was the beginning. This is like several years into his imprisonment. And he started to write letters to different world leaders, and one of those world leaders was the American president or the American Congress, whatever, and like helping them become more aware of what was going on. And I think that was like at least the beginnings of like the whole amount of things that needed to change in order for that change in the world to actually happen. And so um, it began with that thought. and that change again in vibration, in his own vibration. It's
Damn.
fascinating.
Yeah. And again, it's just another example of, looking at someone who was dealt just awful circumstances.
Right.
And, again, like you take 9 out of 10 people and probably they wither in jail and they don't have that type of mentality. But the point is that it's available to you.
Right.
Like if you like that you have that inside of you to choose that response to things. And it's like the minute that you choose to respond to something differently, that it opens a new door, even if it just creaks open, that you have this ability to like, oh wow, like I don't have to take on what the feelings of my situation are telling me to feel. Like I actually can choose to think and feel something differently. And once you kind of try that once and you kind of see that little crack of the door open or that little drop on that parchment that, Nelson Mandela, the way he described it, it's like it's very hard to go back after that because you're like, wow, like I actually have this ability to change, to see this differently.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's fascinating with the law of vibration and how it's a simple thing. I've been saying that literally this whole podcast, but also I think something you brought up, which is really important to remember as well, is that this doesn't just change your life instantaneously. I mean, in a way it does. In a way it does, like it changes your energy, but like you said, it's like a crack open in the door. It starts you down a path. But the only way actually something can really radically change in your life is by having the first step taken, like that
Yeah.
crack of the door open. And so it might not be like the radical transformation in the circumstance immediately, but it does start to open the opportunity. And if you keep walking down that path, you keep generating that vibration in harmony with the reality that you would love, then I would say it's almost guaranteed that it's going to happen, especially because now you're working with spirit. You're working with the infinite because the infinite wants good for everyone. It wants expansion for everything that's alive, everything that's living. This spirit, this infinite power, this source of everything wants expansion. From a scientific point of view, too, is that from the very beginning of our universe, the Big Bang, everything's been expanding since then. And then also evolving and being created into higher and higher evolutions of beingness or evolutions of life. And so life wants that for us and with us. So, but we have to stay tuned to that. It's a choice. It's something that we have to align with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like beautifully said. And I think that's the key. It's like the more that you exercise this ability to choose how to respond, the more that choice of response is going to start sinking into who you are and into your emotional and energetic field. And so it's like that first time you do it again, like it's like, oh wow, I can do this. But it's the continued commitment to choosing the path that you want to think and feel. And so that's why, Kev, I think it's so important too. And in your work, you talk about having that vision and that having that vision of where you want to end up and where you want to get to, and having that, doing your best to emotionally feel into that kind of gives you that North Star guidance when you're in these situations of like, all right, my current circumstances are making me feel this way. Like, I don't want to feel this way. I want to continue moving towards my dream. So like, let me choose to feel as if I'm moving towards that direction. And it's like that continued choice over time that eventually sinks down into who you are. And then it makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that continued choice.
Yeah. We take responsibility in that way for our own vibration because the circumstance usually does, I will say, dictate the vibration that we're in, but it doesn't have to. Like you said, it's like it's our response to it that then dictates the vibration that we're in and that we're emitting or reflecting to the circumstance of whatever we're facing. And I will say this because we've been using some examples that are quite big in scope of like big changes in people's lives and very difficult circumstances. You may be in a circumstance that you might feel is as big or difficult. Maybe not. Maybe it's a smaller version of what we've expressed or shared. But whatever you are facing, it's okay. Like there's no comparison, but it still requires the same choice, the same step to take of recognizing the vibration you're in and taking responsibility for the thoughts that you're thinking, the emotions that you're having, the actions or habits that you're in. And a lot of that comes from, not maybe a lot, but pretty much all of that comes from our past experience, our upbringing, what we've been patterned or programmed into. And not only comes from our life, but it's also in our genes and our genetics. And so it's all passed down. But we have the opportunity to make a different choice right now, right here. And that's the opportunity. And then having the vision, like you said, Chris, that's a game changer. Because once you know where you're going, what you would love, and start to connect with that reality as if it's real right now, you start to change your vibration on a very deep, visceral level so that you have, it's easier, like you said, Chris, to be able to respond to the circumstance in a very different way. And then will absolutely change your life.
Definitely.
Comes down to choice, my friends. Super simple.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel
now
like,
that we've broken it down.
yeah. Now I was going to say, I was remaining quiet because I feel like that was like a perfect transition into like what you wanted to talk about at the end.
Sure.
Your offer
Yeah.
and stuff. Like, I feel
I
like,
feel complete.
yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I was going to share it anyway, but yeah, you're right. It is a good transition. So I'll say one other thing to lead into this invitation I have for you. You may or may not have ever heard of this, that I have invitations usually about like once a month on the podcast for conversations, to have a conversation with me. And but to set this up, it is as simple as changing your vibration. Will tell you it is probably the most difficult work in the world. Because think about it, like what I was just saying before, is that we have decades of programming that lead us to this present moment right now. And it's like this I don't know, this riptide in the ocean, this gravitational pull to the familiar, to always be the same we've always been, to react in the same ways we've always been. And it takes a lot of courage, a lot of energy to be able to make the choice and then sustain that choice of the new vibration we want to be in over time. And a lot of times the challenge is also not having a clear vision, not knowing exactly who we want to be and who we want to become in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So there's a difficulty in actually accessing that new vibration that we can then impress into our current present moment time right now. So that's why I do the work I do as a life coach, but also why I offer these free sessions. So the invitation is, if you feel so guided, and if you feel that there's something you're meant to do in this lifetime, you feel you have a purpose in life to make a difference, to make a positive impact in the world, then I invite you to check in within yourself and see if this invitation resonates. So once a month, like I shared, I open up my calendar for what are called strategy sessions. And a strategy session is a 1 hour free call with me. It's on a Zoom call so we can see each other face to face, where I'll get the opportunity to help you. And in three main ways. We'll go through a process where I'll help you get clear on the challenges you're facing right now, the struggles, the current patterns you feel stuck in. Then we'll move into your vision, and I'll help you clarify your vision, get connected with the reality that you would love, and actually embody it in the moment that you're in. We'll go through an exercise in this call. And then I'll help you in discovering what action steps you could take to bridge the gap from where you are to where you'd love to be in life. Now, these strategy sessions are valued at $250 because it's a private call with you and I. And this is a complimentary gift that I give once a month. And so I open up my calendar. I generally have 10, 15 spots, sometimes upwards to 20 in the month. This month of April, as I'm offering it, I think there's about 13 spots open. So if you'd love to have a session and claim one of those spots because they fill up quickly, then click the link in the description of this episode. It'll bring you to a calendar page that you can choose a day and time that would work for you and me in your time zone. And there'll also be some questions for you to answer so that I can have an insight in where you're at in life and how I can help you on this call. So again, click the link in the description of the episode if that resonates. It's a complimentary call. It's my gift to you. And if you are listening to this episode at some other point that's beyond April 2023, check into the calendar anyway. Like I said, I offer this maybe about once a month. And so you might find an open time in my calendar, present moment time. So if that resonates, click that link, and then we'll talk with you on another episode, my friend. I hope this has helped. The law of vibration.